newspapers that seem to have no sort of relationship in that sense to what we are doing, the lives in the sense that we lead, right? So I'm going to start actually with a story. And I think the important thing that I want to try and flag through this talk is that I mean, we cannot actually think about gender and caste outside of each other if we are talking of the Indian context, right? So you actually cannot make sense of anything that's happening, in India, in contemporary India, without actually looking at the ways in which caste and gender intersect, right? So what I'm going to try and do is hopefully also talk about what is the nature of this intersection, right? I mean, why is it that we are saying you can't talk about caste without gender, or vice versa, right? Or talk about gender without caste. And I want to begin this story actually from the story of a girl called Mukta Salve. I don't know. Some of you might have heard her name when you attended maybe Dr. Redkar's talk last week or something on anti-caste movements. Some of you might have heard her name. For some of you, she might be an entirely new person. But I think hers is an important story. So this is Mukta was a student. She was one of the first students actually, in the school that Jyoti Rao and Savitribai Phule started. And she writes this brilliant, absolutely brilliant essay about 170 years ago. Okay, so this is sometime in the early 1850s, now, because we know that the school was started in 1848. She's one of the first students there, and she writes this brilliant essay, called "About the Griefs of the Mans and the Mahars." Okay, now I'm using these particular caste names because that's what is there in the essay, and I mean, in any sense, in that sense, her analysis really draws from the lived realities of these two particular what at that point of time were considered quote unquote untouchable castes, which we would what we would understand today as SCs or Dalits, right? So she writes this brilliant essay called "About the Grief of the Mangs and the Mahars," and I mean, she writes many things, and I would really urge all of you, and I'll send you a link of the essay if you want. I would really urge all of you to read the essay in its original, because it's absolutely brilliant and needs to be read through and through. But two things that I want to highlight from Mukta's essay, which I think sort of set the tone for the question that we are trying to look at today, which is the question of the intersection of caste and gender. One thing that she says, I mean, she says many many interesting things, but one thing that she says, and I think it's a question that's very, very crucial even today. She says that there is a certain monopoly over the reading of religious texts. Now she says the Brahmin says to us that you cannot read the Vedas, you cannot read the religious texts of the religion. She says, then what are we? Are we bookless? No, she says, are we bookless people? And if we are bookless people, if we don't have access, we cannot read the word of God. Does it mean we have no God? And so she talks to God and she asks God. She says, "Deva, tu mala sang." She's saying, "You tell me, oh God, are we then, if we are bookless people, are we then people without God? And if we cannot read your word, then why should we live by the diktats of apparently a religion that speaks in your name?" Right. So that's one very interesting question that Gupta phrased. The other very important thing, and I think that really is the kind of argument that I want to make today about the question of gender and caste, which is so she says that why is it, huh? And so she picks up something very interesting. She picks up this whole question of reproduction, of biological reproduction, and she says that I'm sorry, I think I got disconnected. Can you all hear me now?
Yes, you're
Yes,
audible.
ma'am.
Okay, I don't know, where did I lose you all?
You were saying she was talking about biological reproduction.
Right. So she she says, and it's very interesting that she talks about biological reproduction, because we often think of motherhood and biological reproduction as something that's so natural, right? And also as something which is a common experience for women, right? So we often think of women as being bound together, or women having a certain commonality of experience because they can all biologically reproduce, and motherhood seems seems to us to be this sort of, binding thread. And what Mukta says is very interesting. She says, how is it that, all you learned doctors and all you learned pundits, you never feel the need to reach out to our women when they are, giving birth, under a tree, in the rain, in the harsh sun. How is it that you never feel the need to reach out to them, right? And I think what she really flags here is a very, very crucial sort of an argument, which is that it's not just, it's not, and I think that is something, I hope to be able to, talk a little bit more about through this, that the intersection of caste and gender is not actually about adding the experiences of caste and adding the experiences of gender. Now, so it's not as if, so often people think about it in terms of double oppression or triple oppression, and they would say that whatever, now that, oh, she is a woman, she is, the name of the essay is about the grief of the Mangs and the Mahars. Mang Maharancha Dukha Vishay is the name in Marathi. I'll send you a link. I'll pass on the link to the English translation of the essay. Right. So people often say, oh, oh, she is a woman. On top of that, she's poor. On top of that, she's Dalit. So we often think about this, or the intersections, or in that sense, the relationship of these structures, as if they are additive, as if there is something that something that happens to you as a woman, then something that happens to you as a, a poor woman, then something else that happens to you as a Dalit woman, and all of these experiences as if, sort of add on to each other or get layered onto each other. But what Mukta is very intuitively pointing out, and we have, of course, now the language, and you might have heard this concept, which is now very, it's a very, very, what do you say, popular concept, intersectionality, right? We've all heard the word intersectionality. We keep hearing about people talking about intersectional analysis, intersectional feminisms, etc. But without in that sense using the word, I think what Mukta is actually trying to point out to us is the fact that gender and caste are intersectional to each other, in the sense that it's not as if being a woman means you have a certain set of experiences, then your experiences of being Dalit get added to it. Rather, the very notion of what it means to be a woman is constructed differently. Okay, so womanhood itself, so it's not as if there is a universal experience of womanhood, then a universal experience of Dalithood, and you can sort of, put these two together to understand what happens, for instance, with Dalit women. But rather, that if you are in that sense a woman and Dalit, the very notion, the very way in which your femininity or your womanhood comes to be constructed is different, right? And basically, in a sense, what she is trying to, therefore, what she is already indexing to us, and she doesn't use the word intersectionality, but she's already, in some sense, indexing to us the fact that Dalit women don't get constructed or don't get seen or don't get conceptualized as being primarily mothers the ways in which upper caste women are. Right, so she's already in that sense, saying that the way in which that femininity gets imagined in a way in which motherhood is not seen as central, right? And so therefore intersectional, I mean, it is not therefore additive, but it is in that sense formative. It is in that sense constitutive, right? So the very notion of what it means for you to be a woman, uh, itself actually is constructed differently if you come from a particular caste. Okay, let me try and give you a sort of parallel example from the context of race, to underline in that sense what I'm saying. Okay, so Angela Davis, in her very, very interesting work, which looks at the questions of capitalism, race, and in America, talks about, for instance, how if you look at the narratives of slavery, and she also talks about how, for instance, white feminists have often argued that they needed to focus in that sense on the experiences of white women, because white women had been burdened in that sense, with notions of motherhood, wifehood, with femininity, with notions of femininity. They had actually been captured and sort of burdened by those notions which were in that sense never the burden that Black women had to carry, because Black women were not seen as primarily wives, etc., etc. And Angela Davis argues, I mean, she says that yes, it's true, the fact that Black women have not had the burden of this sort of quote unquote glorious womanhood, or this sort of oppressive femininity on them. But she says that happens in a very skewed sort of a way, and that happens in a very skewed sort of a way because Angela Davis argues, she says it's not because they have not been they're not being granted femininity, it is because they are not being granted humanity, right? So when Black women get constructed within the institutionalized context of racism and slavery as beasts of burden, they are not granted, they are not seen as human beings at all, they are seen as beast like, and therefore they are not constructed as wives and mothers, they are constructed as animal like, beast like. And so she says, well, yeah, it's true that they have not in that sense quote unquote been burdened by the expectations of motherhood and wifehood, etc. But that is not because they are emancipated, or that is not because they have in that sense been liberated from these notions. In a rather skewed way, it is because they have been denied humanity. So the very femininity, the way in which the womanhood of Black women has been constructed, is constituted by the question of race, right? So it is not therefore about a layering in that sense of womanhood over blackness, over poverty, but the very notion, the very ways in which we think about womanhood is in that sense texturally different for Black and white women, right? Because race constitutes our very notions of gender. And I think in many ways what Mukta is pointing out through that example of reproduction is to actually ask this question of how do we construct the womanhood of different women. Is there in that sense a universal notion of womanhood, or is it already and always constituted, already in that sense constituted by caste, right? So caste is not an additional layer that you put on top of some sort of a universal notion of womanhood. In fact, caste is constitutive of the ways in which you imagine womanhood, right? And so it's really that sort of an intersection that Mukta is already indexing to us. I mean, of course, the questions that we also need to ask, and I think in many ways these are also questions that link up very closely with the kind of questions that this series is trying to ask, is to also ask why is it that so many of us don't know about Mukta Sari, right? I mean, the question is also to ask why is she not a part of our of our curriculum? Why is her essay not something that we read in our school and college textbooks? Why is it that her essay is not a historical event that gets recorded in history? So these are all questions, therefore, which are implicated within these structures of gender and caste, and intersections of gender and caste, and the ways in which they mark knowledge, they mark power, they mark the idea of who gets seen as producers of knowledge, what gets seen as knowledge, so on and so forth. And these are not questions we can think of outside in that sense of this whole question of the intersections of gender and caste, right? So that's my first sort of an argument, right? I'm going to keep asking if you all are with me, and is this all right from time to time, so that I don't go off without this thing. So is this all right? I mean, does this do you all want to say something to this? Are you all here? I mean, I'm just asking because I don't have a way of getting out of
Uh,
yeah.
you got stuck there for a few seconds, but yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, all right, great.
Yeah, this is good.
All right, all right.